Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, you're Canadian by birth, but living in New Zealand. How did you make your way to New Zealand?
Well, that's a bit of a story, but yes, I was born in a town called Corner Brook, Newfoundland in Canada. That's where I was till I think I was 19. I eventually moved to Britain to pursue my education, was there for 4 years, and then I moved to Australia. So I'm an Australian citizen. And
Okay.
I moved to Australia in 2002,
Yes.
and I lived there for 15 years. My wife is Australian,
Okay.
and we moved to New Zealand in 2018 quite by accident because a friend of mine offered me a job, and I was on the phone with him, and I accidentally agreed to move to a different country before I consulted my Australian wife.
Oh,
But very, then I very fortunately, she was keen to do it, and here we are. So it's been a bit of a nomadic journey.
right. Wow. And hence your book, which we'll talk about later. Where are you
Yeah,
based in New Zealand? Where are you?
I, I I've lived in Christchurch since my time here in 2018, and I found it a really good place to be, both an open water swimmer. You know, it's next to the beach. There's some really beautiful harbors.
Yes.
Lakes are close by, and being a triathlete and mountain lover, it's a great spot to live.
Yeah, absolutely. The South Island of New Zealand is beautiful and just
Yeah,
covered with picturesque mountains. I've been there
yeah,
many years ago, but yeah, beautiful place
yeah,
to base yourself. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So one of your monikers that you go by is obviously an adventure marathon swimmer, but you started off as a competitive triathlete. Tell us about that journey and how you became a triathlete.
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, I've been doing triathlons since I was 13. Started as a swimmer, became a triathlete, and now I have been a triathlete who also marathon swims. Now I'm more of a marathon swimmer who also does triathlons,
Right.
and adventure triathlons.
Yep.
Basically, I was always growing up. I was always a high energy, very active little kid, but the absolute worst athlete you could ever imagine. I did all the typical sports that are popular in North America, you know, specifically basketball and baseball. I do enjoy most sports like that, but the trouble is I can't catch, throw, hit, or aim at a target in any way, shape, or form. Um, so um, basically, I was a bench warmer on my grade 7 basketball team when I was 12. And the story is, a very brief version is, during our final tournament where our team was up by 30 points, I asked my coach, a great big man, and I'm not a big guy, and I certainly was smaller back then, you know, could I go out and play for the last 2 or 3 minutes? Because I hadn't played a minute all season. And he, in his snarling reply, slobbering over me at the same time, he told me to sit down. So I got a little sad about that. And it was about 8 or 9 months, I think, where I wasn't active at all, except for weekend downhill skiing, which of course we did in Canada.
Yep.
Ate a lot of junk food. And then basically when I was 13, I was getting out of the shower, and I looked at myself after, you know, several long months of eating junk food and not really being that active. I looked in the mirror and I saw my future. My dad had a heart attack about 3, 4 years earlier. And I
Right.
got, oh my God, I'm turning into dad. And I just went downstairs. I realized I'd always loved swimming. And I said, Mom, I'm wanting to join the swim team. And by that afternoon, she had me registered, and I went to my first swim practice, you know, that day.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and basically what how that relates to the basketball thing is what I immediately liked about being a swimmer was that the coach always let you participate. Like, I mean, I trained hard, you know, in all the sports, but when race time came, you know, there was no, well, you're not very fast, so you can't participate in this. It didn't matter if you won somewhere in the middle or came dead last. And
Yep.
for the first several months, I was coming dead last. So, so yeah, so and yeah, so I was on the swim team for a number of months, and two triathletes who trained with us caught my attention on the pool deck
Yep.
in my hometown. Despite not being a very big place, only about 30 odd thousand people, The hometown triathlon was kind of a big deal, and a fairly high number of triathletes in town.
Yep.
And this is only 1989, so triathlon at that time was a new sport. And one of the top-ranked triathletes in Canada, his name was Scott Ledrew. He just happened to be training with us. He was from my hometown, and he was about maybe 23, 24 at the time when I was 13. And I ended up approaching one of the other triathletes in town. His name was Jamie Merrigan. He was 18 or 19 at the time, so as a teenager, 5-year difference is, a bigger deal than it is, as a 46-year-old now. But basically, I went up to him. He was the top junior in town at the time. And I just said to him, hey, look, I want to do a triathlon like you. And one of the older kids who I might have been 17 or 18, he, overheard my conversation with Jamie. And he came up to Jamie after and he said, who does this guy think he is? He'd never be able to do a triathlon. And why would you waste your time helping him out? And Jamie, his response probably helped shape my adult life. Basically he said, well, if he wants to have a go at it, there's no sense in not trying to help him. And, so he very selflessly, I was already swimming with the team. So he very selflessly helped me start to train on a bike and start to run properly. And, but after overhearing this kid say, I'd never be able to do it. Who do I think I am?
Right.
I was standing on the pool deck with hurt feelings for a few moments. And then I just decided, I don't really know what the answer is to who do I think I am, but whatever that answer is, I'm going to be a triathlete. And my first triathlon a number of months later was a unmitigated disaster. But great fun. My first open water swim was that 1K swim. And at that time, I didn't know anything about sighting in the open water. It never occurred to me that you probably look up and see where you're going. I did this triathlon where I probably swam closer to 2 kilometers rather than the 1K swim. I had a $200 bike that at the time I thought was top range triathlon gear. And by the time the run rolled around, I was just shredded. I'd barely even hit puberty, and I was throwing my guts up on my first triathlon, but it was such a rewarding experience, and kept going.
Well, obviously you represented Canada by the time you were in your 20s on the national team. So was that and you obviously went to a world championship, was that Olympic distance triathlon or what was that?
Yes, that was the Olympic distance. So basically it was the 1997, or it might be 1998, just, whatever it was, one of those years, 7 or 8 years after I started doing triathlons.
Right.
I qualified for the world championships that were that year held in Perth, Australia. And so that was my first trip to Australia. And, I didn't win the world championships, but, the way I looked at it in retrospect is, I went from stumbling through my first triathlon and eventually finished mid-pack, and was 4th or 5th out of the water in the swims. And because I've always been a stronger swimmer than I was cyclist and runner.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you go about fitting in? Obviously, you'd come from the swimming background. How did you go about fitting into your schedule the running and the riding, which you probably had to work on a fair bit?
Yeah, basically, when I was in high school, I was in grade 9 when I did my first triathlon, and a lot of family problems started happening at home, and my dad was going off the rails with alcoholism and that sort of thing. So I more or less gave up, not always, but I didn't go out with my high school friends partying and all that sort of thing. So I basically get up in early morning swim practice, and the mornings that we didn't have swim practice, I'd be out for a run or a ride. Or
Right.
if it was winter, I'd be in my wind trainer in the basement. Cross country skiing in the winter as well, when you couldn't ride your bike on the road because Canada's frozen half the year. And I'd often run home from school, grab my swim bag, run back to the pool, or ride to the pool, whatever worked. And on the weekends, I'd be out doing a long distance bike ride or run.
Right.
And, so it was consuming, and, some would argue maybe took a little too much time, but, it's hard to be an endurance sport athlete, whether you have one sport or three sports to think about, without, making a few sacrifices here and there.
Yeah. I'm really
Yeah.
interested to know. I mean, I think you sort of explained it, but I'm really interested to know what motivated you to be such a self-starter and to get yourself to training, as you said, like running home from school, getting your bag, running back, and fitting that in around your schoolwork. What sort of motivated you to do that?
Basically, I can trace it back to always want to be an active kid and channel the energy. And triathlon was a very good, outlet for a high energy person,
Yes.
that sort of thing. So um, when I started writing about in my book, I realized that, I knew this, but the first strong decision I made as a 13-year-old was I don't want to have a heart attack like my father. So I
Okay.
changed my diet, and then went full on with swimming, and then a number of months later took up triathlon, and then so a number of years later, when I realized my dad was going off the rails with alcoholism, I made another strong decision. It sounds, maybe complaining about my dad too much, but I mean, I did make two strong decisions around him. I didn't want to have a heart attack, and I didn't want to become an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So basically, I found a lot of sanctuary within endurance sport, particularly swimming. And I love cycling and running probably equally as much, but I'm just better at swimming. Plus, one of the things I love about swimming is you just can't talk to people while you're going. So it gave me a lot of time to, explore my thoughts as an introvert. And also, I have a bit of an extrovert personality sometimes, but I like to think I'm probably 70% of the time introvert, 30% extrovert.
Yes.
And swimming is just a wonderful way to, tell the world to go away for a while. I mean, here now, particularly marathon swimming, when you get into swimming 10Ks and longer than that.
Yes.
Some people would say that's boring, but I find that's very meditative for me.
Yes.
So to come back to your question, what's motivated? I think I was motivated originally by wanting to, put my life in a certain direction. I felt that by swimming and doing triathlons, I was taking control. And I realized quite a number of years later that control is an illusion, but that's what it felt like at the time when I was a teenager. I had an untenable home situation where my dad was increasingly abusive. And I felt that, doing what is something I thought was very positive, and, arguably every decision I made in life can be traced back to being a swimmer and a triathlete.
Yes.
I found that was a very empowering thing. So, doing the training, I never felt very few days throughout my 30 plus years of doing this, I've never felt, why would I bother? Why train? I've always wanted to. It's just something innately within me. Always wanted to push the limits.
Yeah.
And so they were the motivators. And then, I developed a good support network around me as well, like-minded people, and, it led me all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the first marathon swim that you competed in, or that you took?
Basically the summer of 1993, the year I was 17. I'll just back up one second and remind me if I forget to answer that question. But about a month before my first marathon swim, maybe 3 weeks, or it might have been 4 weeks, I had the worst fight with my father. He was getting increasingly, threats of violence, but he didn't actually get violent with me until 2 days before a particular triathlon in Truro, Nova Scotia, which is Canada. And, that was 2 days before that race. I had my first physical altercation where I had to actually, knock him out to defend myself. And I was standing at the water's edge of this particular triathlon, which is Olympic distance, 1,500-meter swim, 40K bike, 10K run.
Yeah.
And by this stage, 4 years of training in, I was coming into my own as an open water swimmer, and not a great cyclist. I've always been, relatively speaking, a mediocre cyclist. But when I was at the water's edge, that was when I really decided I got to send my life in one of two directions. I can go down the long line of alcoholics that I come from, or I can, put my life in the direction that I want. And my mental thought process in the moments before the gun went off was, F it. I may not stand a chance against these guys on the bike. I was the youngest competitor in this race. But for the swim, I'm just leaving everyone behind. And basically, that was the first swim that I ever won in a triathlon.
Okay.
And I was just fueled so strongly that day that only the strongest guy in the field, the top ranked triathlete, passed me, and I very nearly ran him down. So I won the junior division and came second overall.
Right.
And that was just a transformative day.
Yeah.
And fast forward a number of weeks, I was in Lac Saint Jean, Quebec, also in Canada. That was my first marathon swim. A number of months earlier, my swim coach had come to me and said, "Hey, you look, you love doing triathlons. Keep doing that. You can also be a marathon swimmer. You got the right mindset."
Yeah.
And she told me about this particular event. And so I went to this 16-kilometer swim in Lac Saint Jean, Quebec, and this is in the days before Google and all that stuff. And, you can imagine a town of 30,000 people in Newfoundland, Canada. The library wasn't stocked with marathon swimming book advice, and all, So my first marathon swim was, okay, the strategy is get in the water, swim as fast as possible for as long as possible until it's over.
Yes.
And that's what happened. But, I learned a lot during that time. I saw the support boats with the other swimmers. Like they have a message board saying, right, swimmer coming up on your right, or feeding time in 5 minutes, or, stuff like that. So, my support boat, they were throwing me drinks and stuff, but there was no structure to it. I was just free for all, I actually won that particular race. 16 kilometers, I think it took 3 hours and I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes. I can't recall exactly, but, the better part of 4 hours.
Yes.
And that was also a day when I realized how much I loved rough water swimming, because the ponds that we swim in and the lakes that we swim in Newfoundland, there wasn't any wave action, and the ocean is too cold in Newfoundland. You don't go in the ocean anytime in Newfoundland. But it was such a big lake, and the wind picked up, and we had actual surf conditions going on. And that was when I really, really realized how much I love rough water swimming, and particularly surf and later rapid swimming.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that first one that you did, you weren't prepared for it, obviously, with your sort of support crew, but you came through and won it anyway. So what then did you change before the next one that you did? Like, what did you have to?
Basically, I just learned, let's make sure we're feeding at the regular intervals. My experience in feeding during an endurance sport was all triathlon based at that time. And, you have your own stuff on the bike, and on the run, you have the aid stations. And this is in the days before Hydro Packs as well and all that. So,
of course.
Basically in the coming marathon swims that I would do, like, right, if I've got a kayak or I've got a support boat, I was like, okay, well, let's, time to watch for every 45 minutes, make sure you throw me an energy gel or an energy drink or something like that. And, make sure that the support boat, knows the route, because went a little off course that time because the boat led me astray. And by the, after my first triathlon, I actually learned how to sight, and swimming in a straight line became a almost natural talent. I could never throw a ball straight, but I could swim straight. And so all the tips like that, and then of course continued experience with training, doing all my stability exercises to make sure that my shoulders stayed healthy. All that stuff started to evolve from there. So I'm basically doing marathon swimming alongside triathlon since I was 17, and I'm now 46.
That's amazing. And so in the early days, did you obviously in Newfoundland, you did all your training in an indoor pool, probably?
In the winter, and what I've always joked about coming from Newfoundland and then later moving to Australia, like in Newfoundland, we have a couple of seasons. We have winter and almost winter, And in Australia, we have summer and almost summer. And but yeah, to be fair, like the swimming season outdoors in Newfoundland in the lakes, I mean, they're beautiful, beautiful lakes.
Yeah.
Very, very similar to what we have here in New Zealand, except here in New Zealand, the swimming season is longer.
Yes.
So I would swim in the lakes, in and around my home, and plenty of them. From around June when, the ice had melted about a month prior, and you'd be freezing. But would still do it anyway. And there was one time I did swim around an iceberg that floated into the harbor. That wasn't a very smart plan. I wouldn't recommend that. And we'd swim a lot of the times we do a multi-sport workout where we'd get one of our parents to drive us out to the lake that was outside of town. Then we'd have the bikes in the back of their car, and then we'd swim a session, and then we'd ride back into town and maybe run as well.
Yeah.
So that's what a lot of our workouts will look like, and still look like for me, actually. So
So fast forward a few years, and obviously you find yourself in New Zealand, and you have taken on a huge sort of epic journey by swimming 256 kilometers down the Clutha River. Tell us about that. How did you decide that you were going to do that swim? Because I believe no one else has done that before. And what motivated you to swim so far? That's a huge distance.
Well, I've sort of evolved from being more competitive, to enjoying more adventures, and I'm not 100% sure if that's just because I'm getting a bit older, and chasing best times isn't what I'm going to be doing anymore.
Yeah.
And the kids don't seem to have any respect for their elders anymore either. So, but what I found is after, many years of competing, what I started to enjoy was doing challenging adventures. Yeah. And most of my adventures are triathlon related, whether it's a big swim or a big bike ride or a hike or a run. And at some stage I realized what I really liked was doing multi-day stuff. And that actually came to that realization actually in Australia. It wasn't a swim. I did a 4-day ultra marathon across the Larapinta Trail, not too far from Alice Springs.
Yep.
And I had a lot of fun doing that. It was basically 6, 7, 8 hour days of running in the desert. And that was when I was like, yeah, this is, having a good solid day out, then enjoying the camaraderie of a group.
Yes.
Was like, yeah, that lit me up more than trying to chase the best time or, going as hard as I could. Or, so basically after I moved to New Zealand, before I thought of river swimming, I was, trying to think of where I'd go from here, in terms of where I'd spend my money and all that sort of thing. And, I thought of the Ocean 7, but unfortunately the price tag of that's not exactly cheap.
Yes.
So what I started, it was my wife that actually nudged me in this direction. We were down at a lake called Lake Tekapo, which I later swam just this past February. It's 26-kilometer lake. We were down there in winter, so it was too cold to swim then, but we were standing on the edge of the lake, and my wife said to me, hey, look, if you were to swim across this lake, would you have a worse time than if you spent $10,000 and go across, and swim this big strait that would, set us back financially for a year, and that'd be the only event you could do because of the money.
Yeah.
She said they would cost you a hotel room and you buy your support kayak or a pizza, and would you have a worse time? And I was like, geez, she's right, and so later I just came across this particular event that was down in the Fiordlands on the southwest corner of New Zealand in a little town called Te Anau. And it was run by this little organization called the FEAR Society, which is the Fiordland Endurance and Adventure Racing Society.
Okay.
And one of their events was a marathon swim that swam several kilometers across Lake Te Anau, which is this beautiful lake. Then it was down the Waiau River, and the Waiau is 22 or 23 kilometers long, I think.
Okay.
And this is the river that they actually used for the filming in the original Lord of the Rings movie. I can't remember the name of the river in the Lord of the Rings movie, but it's beautiful scenery.
Yeah.
And then the swim exits into Lake Manapuri, which is the entrance to the Fiordlands.
Right.
And then we swam across Lake Manapuri for what was it, 10 or 11 kilometers, I think. So it was a several kilometer lake swim, then a 22-kilometer river swim, then another 10K in the lake, or
Wow.
might have been 11. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I mean, when I was coming down this river, I was just like, wow, this is so much fun.
Yeah.
And, I looked around New Zealand, and a lot of the rivers around here, they're just not deep enough for swimming. I mean, it's just, up to your knees or something like that.
Yeah.
So I just got in contact with the race director shortly after, and I said, hey, like which rivers, are really out there that I can really swim. I'll do this event repeatedly, but what else is there? And he pointed me in the direction of the Clutha.
Right.
And he said, I hadn't seen the Clutha at that stage. And he said, you could probably swim the upper Clutha in one day, and, he didn't really think about doing the full thing because that would take several days. So I immediately looked on YouTube, and I just basically found a YouTube section of every section of the Clutha, and it's definitely deep enough. So the Clutha is, just for context, it's the second longest river in New Zealand, the longest on South Island, but it is by far the deepest and most powerful current of any river in New Zealand.
Right.
So I just emailed the harbor master in Otago, which is based in Queenstown, just a short distance from Wanaka, where the Clutha starts, and said, hey, I got this idea. I'm going to swim the full length of the Clutha over several days. What do you think? And he emailed back, and he must have thought just some idiot was, some idiot tourist is coming in, and and he said that would be impossible. That his exact words were, that would be impossible, and only an idiot would try it. So I thought, oh, okay, I'm an idiot. I'll go for it. And it is a big logistical effort. Like, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like swimming down a river is just, jump in the river and see what happens.
Yes.
Like a multi-day swimming expedition. It was 10 months of planning it, logistical, safety, getting the support kayakers, training. It was a big adventure, and a big expedition that I first estimated would take 6 days. Turned out it took 4.5. It was quite a mission, and that really fit with my newfound love of multi-day adventures that are challenging, and of course in the triathlon, marathon swimming.
Yes.
It was pretty cool that no one had done it, but I would have done it even if 50 people had done it before. And it was just an incredible adventure, and it was the biggest swim of my life, and arguably the most challenging thing I've done.
Yeah. Would you do it again?
I'd love to, and I have a theory. I'm not 100% sure if I'll do the full Clutha just as a marathon swimming again. I'm not going to speculate on that, but I have a theory that I'd like to do the Clutha River as a triathlon as well. So basically, my idea would be like swim a section of every section of the Clutha has beautiful cycling and running trails and stuff around it. Right. So I thought, I could swim the upper Clutha, then spend a couple of days cycling and running in the area, then jump back in the Clutha and then cycle and run. And that would give you more time to interact with the locals and, see the beautiful scenery that's around there as well.
Yes.
And I've been doing other rivers as well. Like I swam the Buller, and I more recently swam the Waimakuri River Gorge, which is the gorge they use for the kayak section of New Zealand's coast to coast multi-sport race. Right. So people kayak down there, and I decided to be the idiot to swim it. So,
so on the Clutha swim, how many K were you swimming a day?
It varied because the current strength ranges, because there's 2 actual dams on the Clutha as well.
Okay.
So the upper Clutha was my first section, and it drains out of Lake Wanaka, where the outlet is, and it goes into Lake Dunstan. And it's 44K from there. And that took exactly 4 hours. And so that was actually where the strongest undertow was, the strongest hairpin bend, and one of the strongest rapids as well. Wow. So we got through the upper Clutha in 4 hours. Then I had lunch by Lake Dunstan. About an hour and a half later, jumped back in, swam across the 14K Lake Dunstan, which is, not moving. Yes. So that took that 14K, I think, took 3 hours and 40 odd minutes or so. Right. And that was it for day one. And we stayed in that area. And the next day we swam through the Cromwell Gorge, which is not moving very fast at all. And there's a dam at the end of the gorge.
Yes.
So we swam, took 5 hours to get 26 or 27K, if I remember correctly, through the Cromwell Gorge. So that was, a big section of day 2.
Yes.
And just for context, after the dam, the current really picks up again.
Okay.
So I swam 27K in 5 hours, and then I swam 27K in 1 hour and 15 minutes or something.
Wow.
So,
okay. So yeah,
yes. So it was a big difference. Yeah. So forgive me if I get a few of those distances wrong, but I mean,
no.
I'm just going off my memory. But
yeah, no,
I described.
That's fine.
Yeah, just described it all in my book. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely like 27K in one day was like, okay, well that took 5 hours because we're in the gorge that's slow moving, and then then you just get into this rip roaring current.
Wow.
And then as we approached Alexandra, which was where I finished on day 2, Alexandra's little town in central Otago. Got out of the Clutha River where there's a bridge, and there's a no swimming sign because it's dangerous. And and I got out of the water, and this man was sitting there. He was, this little park where we got out of the water, and he was there with his kids, and then I just emerged from the Clutha like this sea creature, and he was just looking at me like, what the hell? He said, and he said, what are you doing? I've lived here all my life. I've never seen anyone come out of there like that. And I told him, what I was trying to do, and he was like, how could you possibly do that? Like Belle Clutha and the mouth of the Clutha is like 150K away. You can't possibly swim that far. And I was like, we'll see.
What grade of rapids are we talking about when you said there?
It gets up to grade 3. Like the fortunate thing about the Clutha is because it is so wide and relatively speaking, and deep. I mean, there are rocks to dodge, but I mean, because it's wide, I had one kayaker up ahead. They had VHF radios. One kayaker was with me the whole time, communicating instructions and also feeding me. And so Sam, one of my support kayakers, he'd be radioing his girlfriend Laura, who'd be saying, right, go to the, we got a rock coming up, go to the river left or punch straight down the middle, or we got a sharp left turn or a sharp right turn coming up. There's rapids.
Okay.
And Laura would just, stop and say, hey, this is what's going on. Be prepared. Follow me to the letter.
Yeah.
So that's how it was. And my wife drove the support van. So she'd meet up with us, and she'd be in contact with the kayakers on VHF radio as well. A few spots she'd lost because of you lose signal, but that was a bit scary sometimes. But because parts of the Clutha are remote. But I mean, it was a river swim. Like I say, it's an expedition where you got to consider all those things, and
yes. So do you have to apply for permits for a swim like that, or you said you spoke to the harbour master, but
I mean, I told them my intentions, and I mean, I did basically get written permission in the end when I explained, like there were people who swam other rivers around the world, and the guy, you probably heard of him, Ross Edgley, the fellow who swam the perimeter of Britain. I basically referenced these different expeditions that have happened, more or less gave them a swimming resume and a triathlon resume saying, hey, look, I'm not just going in half cocked here. And we did full risk assessments, and we spent hours and hours and hours, for months, just going through Google Earth looking for spots like, at this particular spot, we might have to get out of the river. I was okay with it. It never happened. I never actually needed to exit the river for safety reasons. But like, looks like there's a big rock here. Might have to say, right, we'll get out of the river, walk around this particular corner, and I was, I didn't want to do that, but I mean, I was like looking at this isn't an ego thing saying, right, I swam every inch of the Clutha. It was, let's go down and have a good time and have a challenging adventure. And if you got to get out of the river for 400 meters, well, that's okay. But it didn't happen, but it could have. We did get permission from the harbor master, both in Otago and a bit further down as well. saying, here, what we're doing. And I alerted all the jet boat companies. We didn't have any problems with boating on the river. Like I say, it's a big river.
Yeah.
And, my kayakers were protecting me as well. So I wouldn't encourage anyone to just jump in a big river and go for it. It's a big logistical effort.
Yes. How often do you take on feed and hydration doing a swim like that? Like what's your
generally speaking, like every 45 minutes. But the difference in river swimming and, swimming in a lake or in the ocean is, the conditions don't always allow you to take a feed right on when you want to.
right?
Because 45 minutes come up, but we might be going through a surging rapids or fighting a hairpin bend or dodging rocks, or the current's just too fast to take it. So I mean, there's certainly challenges at various times that are unpredictable. So sometimes an hour and a half would go by, just not because I wanted to go that long without food, but just wasn't really safe to say, right, I'm going to stop and take because I mean, it could be there's a few occasions where you're like halfway through an energy gel and my kayak could be saying, oh, we got a rock coming up, better give that back and start sprinting. So so the challenges of river swimming like that, and the other one that a lot of people don't really realize, like when I told a few people about my intentions, I mean, I always laughed when people would ask me, are you going to go up or down river? And I found that a bit of an ego stroke, where some people thought for a moment that I might be strong enough to go up river, because no one could. Michael Phelps couldn't go up the Clutha. But the thing about river swimming is obviously you're going faster, than in current neutral, but because your hand and your arm is going against the oncoming current as you're doing your stroke, it's actually harder work doing each stroke. And of course, in most marathon swims and most marathon anything, the idea is to try to hold a relatively constant pace. But because you have to sprint around corners, you got to get out of eddies, you got to sprint out of whirlpools, and there's a few giant ones on the Clutha. Undertows pull you under, going through the rapids, you got to be sprinting a lot. Right. So on a 4.5 day mission of marathon swimming between 7 to 9 hours each day, there were a lot of intervals and just irregularly timed. Like sometimes time would go by where you didn't have to do anything, like sprinting, like swimming across some of the low current places. But then you got this 1, 2, 3 hour section where every several minutes there's a sprint involved. So
that's a lot to sustain. Absolutely. How did you recover each day? Like, what did you do when you stopped for that night? Did you have a routine?
Well, a lot of the recovery, I think, had a lot of reserves built up over 3 decades of endurance sport. And one of the things that I think I'm very convinced that has kept me going, except for a couple of impacts, I haven't had any injuries since I was 16. Part of that's chiropractic. I'm a chiropractor myself. I came to chiropractic through injuries when I was 16, and that sorted me out. So I thought, yep, I'll be a chiropractor. Right. In addition to that, I'm very, I've been doing yoga and Pilates for quite a long time. I think I took that up when I was 29. Okay. In retrospect, I wish I took that up when I was a teenager. Because I've grown very convinced that having postural strength, particularly as get further and further away from being 21, what I found in my training is that, like, just say for example, during the week, I've got 2 hours available for training. I found it's more valuable for me to say do 90 minutes of cardio, whether it's swimming, cycling, or running, and then do 30 odd minutes of yoga. And I haven't found my cardio suffered, and my postural strength and recovery is, helped. So after I'd get out of the river, I'd do, a short yoga routine, like not a full on class, got to save the energy, but there'd be a yoga routine, particularly for my shoulders, but also, you don't want to miss out on your legs and all that sort of thing, because your hips can go funny when you're trying to sprint and kick like a madman when you're, in the middle of it. So there was that. I'd obviously be eating well, like, I'm not afraid of having a chocolate now and then, but I do eat, good recovery foods. My wife was the cook. She fed us, and she spoiled us rotten. And I mean, without her, none of this would have happened. I mean, she, I obviously had my kayak supporters who directly helping me, but my wife was really the unsung hero of this Clutha River expedition because she fed us, she looked after us. You know, I mean, basically, after I was, you know, sitting on my camping chair, you know, wherever we were on the riverbank, you know, like, you know, a gluttonous king sitting on his throne being fed, you know, you know, but you know, it was only a week later, I said, you know, my wife, she wanted to go to this particular music festival. So we said, yep, during the recovery phase, we went to a music festival that, you know, she really wanted to go to. So hopefully I paid her back.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. Yeah,
how many sort of Ks a week in training did you sort of put in leading up to a swim like that?
I was aiming to get it, you know, during training where there wasn't another lake or something. Like I did a lot of other expeditions, but I was aiming to get at least 10K in a week. And very often, like a month before, I did what I now refer to as self-made adventure triathlons, where I swam the Buller River. And the Buller, we swam the lower 42. You can't swim the upper Buller because there's too many rocks, and there's also several waterfalls that land on rocks. And you know, people might think I'm a little nuts swimming down rivers, but I got sense enough not to go over a waterfall. And
probably.
So the Buller River swim, for example, a month out was a 7-hour swim. And, you know, I swam across several of the big lakes that are here as well. And, you know, here in Christchurch, we've got the harbor. So very often, you know, we'd be doing a 10K or a little bit more than that every week. During the week, you know, generally speaking, I've got 2 hours available most days during the week, you know, for training. So whether it's in the pool or, you know, nip over to the sea or to the harbor, be doing that. Plus, you know, my cycling and running.
Yes.
And when I do my mountain runs, like, you know, I do alpine running and trekking, I use poles as a cross trainer for marathon swimming. Because I don't think I'm a marathon swimming purist because I don't want to miss out on time in the mountains because I love mountains equally as much as the water. So using poles during my mountain runs, particularly going up hills, and there's lots of big ones in New Zealand, you know, I found that to be a really good cross trainer. Plus, when I run, I often do, or ride my bike, I'll do sets of 20, 30, or 40 push-ups every half an hour to get the upper body while still getting the cardio in.
Yeah.
So, you know, my regular pool swims are between 4 and 5, maybe 6 kilometers sometimes, depending on the time available. And my open water swims are generally 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours for training. Yep. And then, you know, and to make sure that I keep life in balance, like my wife's very active. We do yoga together, we cycle tour, and we, what we now call tramping, but back before we moved to New Zealand, it was called trekking.
Right.
Yeah, so a marathon swim, for example, training morning, you know, or I might swim for 2 or 3 hours, you know, get out, have lunch, and then my wife and I are off hiking. So getting some good cardio in that way and also spending quality time with her at the same time.
Yeah, that sounds like an ideal life. I love it.
Well, it's not without challenges. I mean, and, you know, sometimes the internet personality and the internet impression that you give people can be a little different. I don't post anything on social media that isn't swimming, cycling, or running, but you know, I have a job full time, and you know, now and again stress happens. But you know, I mean, I'm very fortunate to have married both a, you know, wonderful woman who supports these crazy ideas, and you know, every which way she can, she's involved in them, and I like to think I support her in her crazy ideas as well. Yeah. So you know, generally speaking, I'm very content with the way things have turned out. So
that's lovely. Yeah. That's lovely. And I'm interested to sort of explore your mindset before a huge swim like that. Do you have any sort of routines that you go through? What's your sort of self-talk while you're doing a big marathon swim?
Honestly, like I do a lot of self-talk, you know, more on the bike and on the run than I do in the swim.
Right.
I mentioned I do yoga, and theoretically I'd love to be able to meditate, you know, in the traditional sense. You know, you sit under a tree or looking at a candle or something like that, where your mind just goes quiet. I love that idea, and I, you know, if people are able to achieve that, I'd recommend it. But I found that if I'm sitting down doing nothing, my mind will just go to something ridiculous, like, you know, what did Homer Simpson do on this particular Simpsons episode, or you know, remember when Darth Vader announced that he was Luke's father, or you know, something crazy. Just my mind will do that. What I found with swimming most of the time is that I can get into quite a meditative state where I'm almost not thinking at all, and that's my flow state. Yes. So I wouldn't say I'm a Buddhist monk swimming, but I do think that that's what traditional meditation must be like if you're doing it right. And so, I don't want to make it sound like that happens every session. It doesn't.
Yes.
And when things go wrong, like in a marathon swim, when you start hurting or something like that, you know, uh, I just think about my next stroke. Like I don't. If you do your sighting, like for example, when I was swimming across Lake Tekapo, 26 kilometers, and then a headwind came in. I had a tailwind for the first 3 hours or so, and then the wind unforecasted changed to a headwind, and I was 3 hours into what I thought might be a 7-hour swim, but thanks to the headwind, it was 9.5. So when I realized, fighting a headwind is like, okay, there's some positive mantras that I like to think about. This is relevant to the river in particular, but there's a particular song called "The River" that was popular when I was a teenager by Garth Brooks. And what I like to think is a life mantra for me is the particular line in that song: "Don't you sit up on the shoreline and say you're satisfied. Choose to chance the rapids and dare to dance the tide." Okay. And that's something I often, and that was my favorite song when I think it was popular when I was 17 or 18.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was popular in Australia or New Zealand, but it was in North America.
Yeah.
That's something on the last day of the Clutha in particular, I found myself singing my favorite song in my head. And, and like everyone else, sometimes your mind goes into a dark place. Even swimming for me, sometimes your mind can go into a dark place. Sometimes it's like, I found both in Ironman triathlon, marathon swimming, and, when I later wrote the book, you have really all these high moments where you're on an emotional high. And then you just have moments where you're like, no one's making me do this. Why am I doing this? No one's paying me. No one's making me do this. So your mind does go there. But I'm generally speaking, in most endurance sport, able to pull the mind out, and I think it's because endurance sport teaches you resilience. And I've had a few challenges in life where no fun going through them at a time. But I think when you face some kind of adversity, sometimes early on, it can have a negative effect, but, I just think facing adversity, both forced on you and self-imposed, can help you not only get through, the hard bits of any endurance event, but also in, those storms that are going to happen in life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you've mentioned a few times about the book that you wrote, and for all the listeners, we'll put that the link to that in the show notes. It's called Downriver Nomad. How did that all come about? What made you decide to write about your swimming journey?
Well, I've always wanted to write a book. Basically, as I got more into this, writing a book sort of went on the life to-do list that always kind of got put on the back burner a bunch of times. And I was a creative little kid. I was always drawing pictures, cartoons, and I was always writing short stories when I was a little kid. Really liked it. And then I realized at some point, through adulthood, lost touch with the creative side. Life got busy, big time commitment with endurance sport and work and a lot of other stuff. So at some point I realized, I've kind of lost touch with that creative side that I've always wanted to nurture as well. Yeah. So the first obstacle I had a number of years back to writing a book was, who's going to read a book about little old me? It seemed like a bit of an egomaniac thing. I often read adventure biographies and biographies of elite athletes. Ultra marathon man Dean Karnazes. He was an inspiration, and and there was Finding Ultra by Rich Roll, and then I read Des Renford's the Australian marathon swimmer's autobiography and all that.
Yes.
Pretty much you name the book, I've probably read it if it's in that genre.
Yes.
So basically, when I finished the Clutha, I thought, a couple of days later, I was like, geez, that's a pretty cool conclusion to a book.
Yeah.
I've never won an Olympic gold medal, but I'm the only person to do this, and I had an epic time, and I think it's a story worth telling. And then scarcely a month after I finished the Clutha, this was February 2020 when I did the Clutha. the pandemic hit, and New Zealand had one of the strictest lockdowns in the world. And on day 2, when you really take on board, it's like, okay, they're not messing around. This is a thing, I said, okay, well, I could either be, I don't know how long this is going to go on for. I can either be a Netflix junkie, or I can put my time to the use of something I've always wanted to do. And we were allowed to go out cycling and running, and we weren't allowed to swim either in a pool or in the ocean in the New Zealand lockdown. So I'd ride my bike 2-3 hours a day or run and do a yoga routine.
Right.
And then the rest of the time I was writing a book. And also coming back to my wife, I mean, she published her first book about 1.5 years prior, and that was an inspiration watching her do that.
Yeah.
And then she's since made a career move to become a writer, part of the time as well. And,
right.
She has since just yesterday actually published her first children's book.
Oh,
and that's a long line. And she's also written 2 novels. One is going to be published next year. But even before that got published, because publishing, I've learned, is a slow business.
Right.
She got her second novel, and she's actually now working on her third. So I gotta, I've always wanted to write a book, and that was in my mind before I even met her. But seeing her do it and pushing through it, and I'd liken writing a book to endurance sport, to marathon swimming. And as I said, there's times when you think, oh, this is great fun, I'm loving doing this. But, you get to the late editing stages and stuff like that, and you think, why am I doing this? No one's making me do this. But, you push through, you learn to push through it. And, the other question I asked myself, on day 2 of the lockdown was, right, if I'm going to do this, if I know for a fact that I'm not going to make money off of writing a book, would I still want to?
Yes.
And, the answer was yes. And I said, right, the goal is to have 7 people not named my mom read it. And the second goal after that was to earn enough money to buy a new wetsuit off the book. And well, I've done that and then some. So, the feedback that I've gotten from my book, people have reached out to me, some who I know directly, some who connected through social media, the endurance sport groups, and they told me they've enjoyed the story. So, I'm very happy with the book, and it turned out, just the way I wanted it. So I'm very happy with it.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people listening will follow up and read the book, because it's a great swimming journey. It's fantastic. I wanted to finish up just asking you 5 fast facts about yourself before we wind up.
Okay.
So just answer sort of like one or 2 words, or if you want to go longer than that, that's fine. It's just a bit of a fun thing to finish off with. So I just call it fast 5. Favorite place to swim?
It's got to be the Clutha River.
Fantastic.
Yep. When not doing that, I love surf swimming at the beach.
No, okay. What's your local surf beach that you swim at?
There's a Long Beach in Christchurch, different sections from New Brighton to what's called Sumner, just about 10 minutes from where I live.
Right. Okay. Favorite pre-swim meal?
I love chia seed pudding. Like if I'm swimming in the morning,
yes,
chia seed pudding, with sliced fruit across it. I just find that stuff filling. It's energy providing. It's like rocket fuel. Yes. And if my swim is scheduled for after lunch, like if I got the afternoon off or something like that, I will generally eat a rice stir fry of some kind, with vegetables and something quite light, like nothing very heavy.
Yes.
And the worst thing you can eat before swimming, despite my love of pasta, I never have pasta before a swim anymore, because it just doesn't sit right in the guts. So I'll do it the night. Yeah, not for me, it doesn't anyway. Especially if there's tomato sauce.
Yes.
Yeah.
Favorite wetsuit brand?
I was lucky enough to be sponsored by Blue 70. The Helix, I found that to be my favorite wetsuit that I've ever worn. I've worn different brands over the years, but the Helix has awesome shoulder flexibility and just my body shape. It seems to be, that fits me perfectly.
Yep.
So I found the Blue 70 Helix is definitely my favorite suit.
Yep. And thermal cap or no thermal cap?
Depends on the water temperature. When I swam across, I was the first person in the day after Boxing Day last year to swim across Lake Coleridge, which is an elevated mountain lake.
Right.
It was 16 kilometers, I think, and it wouldn't have been possible at that time. Basically we started, the frost was still on the ground, and the mountains that surround it had snow on them.
Right.
It would not have been possible without a thermal cap, and I wore booties for that one as well.
Yes.
So there's some kind of back and forth talk in the open water swimming community. Sometimes it gets toxic.
Yeah.
My recommendation is, if wearing a suit or a thermal cap, gloves, booties, if it makes your swim more enjoyable, just do it.
Yes.
And I tend to cover myself up either with a wetsuit or with a triathlon suit, long sleeve, because I'm a fair-skinned, freckled redhead from Canada, and I live in the Southern Hemisphere. My sun-repelling genetics just are the worst possible sun-repelling genetics in the world. So I do have to cover myself up to be an open water swimmer, and I'm okay with that. So
I hear you. And funniest swim moment?
I lost a fight to a turtle.
Okay, tell us about that.
It was in Australia. I was doing just an adventure swim on my own. I was swimming along the length of the beach, and I was hammering. I was by myself, just, I don't know how far offshore, maybe less than 50 meters offshore, and I was just going along the length of the beach.
Yep.
And I was hammering. I was going for all I was worth, and it was meant to be about a 20K swim.
Yes.
Maybe 13, 14K in. I was literally thinking, I'd started that swim. I was having a few frustrations in my life at that time. Yeah. And I was upset, and, about different circumstances going into the swim, but it set my mind right. And I literally had the thought, sky's blue, water's really blue, beautiful fish swimming around me, the birds are chirping, really leading a charmed life here. And I slammed into a very large sea turtle and actually dislocated my shoulder.
Oh, wow.
So for a moment, I thought I'd hit a shark, and started to sprint away from it, and fully dislocated my shoulder after I'd hit it.
Oh, no. And
then I basically rolled on my back to basically kick at what I thought was a shark coming at me. Yes. I was looking at this big turtle, and I was like, oh, geez, I just lost a fight to a turtle that wasn't even a ninja.
Did the turtle follow you after it hit you?
It didn't. It didn't follow me. I just had to get myself back into shore. I dislocated my shoulder on the back of a turtle. Yes. And, basically popped back in, but getting through the surf back to the beach was quite a painful experience. Okay. So, and then I'm standing there in my wetsuit, suddenly burning, it was suddenly burning up because, wetsuit on the beach in Australia can get pretty hot in a hurry. So that's right. It's really funny in retrospect, was not funny at the time.
I get it. Well, Rob, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been lovely hearing about your swimming journey, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And my book is just called Downriver Nomad, and the subtitle is A Triathlete's Adventures and Adversities into the Rapids. Yep. So if your listeners are keen, I really hope you might enjoy my book. And there's also a YouTube documentary. It's homemade. If you go on YouTube and search Clutha River Swim, it's a 53-minute homemade documentary of the Clutha River Swim. Yeah,
that sounds great. I'm sure a lot of people will look it up. Okay.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Okay then. Bye.